when you live with a chronic illness, because you have to put yourself in a situation where you're confident that whatever is thrown your way, you will manage it. You will get through it. You will figure out a way to adapt, because look, we do, right? Like, I'm sure, like, when you got Crohn's or when you got diagnosed with Crohn's, it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life? How am I going to adjust to this? And you do get through it. And that's really important, to have that belief and confidence. So really working with my mind and tuning into the negative thoughts that are going through it, right? It's like, even with work-wise, you can't do this, you're not as good enough, like other people are able to. Those kind of things affect how you move through the world a lot.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Dude Therapist. I'm so excited to have Nicole Pedra on. I got to know her because of Dr. Rachel, our colleague and friend. You guys were all having the same matching tracksuit at Reese Witherspoon's event, and it was really like, who is this awesome person hanging out with another awesome person, hanging out with another awesome person? Shout out to Dr. Lucky. But it really got me to look into who you are and what you represent, which is honesty, transparency, and reality of the darkness and solitude and isolation of chronic illness. And it really just spoke to me because I have a chronic illness, and to see someone as classy, put together, well-spoken, yet so normal, talk about something that people don't really see, which is chronic illness, is you. And I'm like, okay, we got to make this happen. So before we get into the questions, the conversation about that topic, could you introduce yourself to listeners so they get to know you, which they already should, but if they don't, let's do it now.
Yeah, so I'm Nicole Pedra, and I am a chronic illness advocate. I use my social media platforms to really, be vulnerable and to show the different sides of living with something that is so complex. I also am a public speaker. I have my own podcast currently called Seen Not Fixed, part of Spoonly Production, and things are kind of just taking off. I'm doing a few things all at once, but the biggest thing is to give back to my community and help them in any way I can.
You know, it's wonderful to see someone trying to do it all and figure it all out. And a lot of the posts that I truly, really connect with, other than the more spaghetti, less upsetty, which you just posted, because I'm totally a pasta fanatic, is the idea of people don't see it, so it must not be real. Can you talk about your journey? I know you have MS. I know you talk about ADHD and a slew of other things. What is it like going through life when people just assume that you have it all together, doing all the things you're doing?
Right.
She's doing this, doing that, but on the inside and in the quiet of your home, or I don't know about you, maybe on the floor crying in your bathroom, no one sees that. Can you talk about that balance a little bit, or the disconnect that people don't see?
Yeah, well, it's really hard because you feel dismissed and you start to question if you have kind of a right or a leg to stand on, because people's expectations of you are different. Because you look normal, they hold you to an able-bodied expectation. So it's really this confusing, partitioned life that you're leading, because people aren't giving you the space and the recognition. And it's so hard to operate to meet other people's expectations, because then we get so hard on ourselves, right? I remember when I was first diagnosed, really, it was just so upsetting because I didn't look sick. So didn't feel like I had enough, I was able to even be upset, right? And then people are always telling you, because you don't look sick, like things could be worse, right? I was recently just sick with the flu, and the first few days I was totally dead, out of it, on the couch, couldn't move, and to my father, bless his heart, I visibly looked very sick. And as the days continued, my voice was sounding better. And my dad was just like, oh, well, you must be doing so much better. You sound good. And to me, I was still dying inside, right? But any illness kind of goes through different transitions. And it just felt very dismissive and invalidating because someone assumed that I was better just because of the way I looked.
Yeah. Not to get weird or anything, but when you scroll through your social media, you do modeling, you do all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I remember years ago when I was in grad school, I had a colleague of mine who was a supermodel. And
Mm-hmm.
I said to her, I said, what are you doing becoming a therapist? And she said, no one takes the modeling world seriously, that they're humans. It's more of this goddess, God looking being that has it all figured out, all put together, and all just buttoned up. But they
Right.
are human and they struggle. And she was there specifically to study eating disorders and that world of starvation and that perfection of look. And it really got me thinking. I remember that day talking to her. Don't remember her name. I'm sorry. I'm not great at names. It's not my superpower. Remember everything else about her, but not the name.
Right.
ADHD. And it was more of the idea, welcome to my brain. It was more the idea
Yeah.
of, wow, thank you for sharing that with me because I know what that's like. Not that I'm a model and I am performative and on the stage looking certain ways, but if you show up, people assume that you're okay. So, can
Right.
you kind of give a little bit of background before we get into more of the mental health side of
Mm-hmm.
that, how that plays with you about your journey of being diagnosed and the ups and downs of that, so that anyone who might be listening who was going
Right.
through that chronic illness journey doesn't feel so alone, maybe can feel a little seen and understood.
Well, you're mentioning that she was a supermodel and people saw her a certain way, and she kind of had to really be vulnerable and come out about things so people understood it's just not what it looks like. At the same time, when your illness is invisible, you feel like you have to hide it because people won't understand. They don't, it's very hard to grasp the concept of that someone doesn't look sick, but they are sick. It just doesn't make sense in their minds. So a lot of what I was going through, I felt like I could hide it. And that led to so much shame and isolation because when people can't understand something and they don't understand it for such a long period of time, you start to think that they could never understand. So you're living in this world that you feel really isolated because no one gets it. Right? Like my biggest thing as a kid was saying, you don't understand. You don't understand. I tried to explain things that like I wasn't able to do certain things, you know, we're pushed to do them. Oh, you're faking it. You just want to get out of this. You're not trying hard enough. You just have to be more positive. And when people don't understand and that's not the case, you feel just alone, right? And you feel like, why is this happening to me? It's funny because you mentioned being on the ground and crying. I lived in my walk-in closet. Like that was my safe space. And that is a place where I would just be, where I felt that I could be upset and that people weren't judging me. But outside of that closet, I felt like because I looked okay, I needed to be like everyone else, if not better, because I had to prove to people that I was fine because I looked fine. And that is something that's very hard to deal with at any stage of your life, especially when you're undiagnosed and you go through this long journey of trying to figure it out. Like that in between space of being sick and not having a diagnosis is super difficult. People don't understand. Why are you going to the doctors? You're making this up. Everyone has stomach issues, right? And you start to second guess yourself. Am I being dramatic? Is there a problem? Do other people feel this way and they're just not complaining about it? Right? The sense of normal and what's normal in your brain is kind of really fucked with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of really messed with.
Yeah.
And it can be all consuming. And then you have trouble being present. you experience a lot of worried and concern that steals a lot of joy. So it's a very, you know, under underestimated or under recognized for the difficulty that we experience.
Yeah. It's so interesting. You talk about that safe space in the closet. For me, it was growing up. I don't think they make beds like this anymore. I don't think they're so safe. But it was a high riser that had drawers, but behind the
Yeah.
drawers, there was like a cave-esque type space. Like that was me where I would sit and journal, where I would sit with my stuffed animals. That was like my hiding spot for protection. I haven't thought about that in years. Thank you for
Yeah,
bringing that out.
definitely.
We all have that spot. It leads me to think about the outside versus the inside world, right? How it looks on social media, how it looks to other people, like the curated version of ourselves or the masks that we wear. And I remember
Yeah.
my wife and I, we went and still go through IVF and fertility issues. And I remember sitting in a therapist's office trying to work through some of that shame, embarrassment of like, why me
Shame.
and woe is me. And I remember saying, but at least I don't have it as bad as, and named off people I knew that were struggling for years. I only have been struggling for a year or two. And I remember this vividly, still owe this therapist a lot of my healthy mindset.
Hmm.
He looked at me and said, don't do that ever again, not in my office. And I went, huh? Therapist's not supposed to yell at me. He goes, don't say that ever again. Don't compare yourself to other people. Their struggle's not yours. Your struggle's not theirs. You struggled for 2 years. That matters.
Right.
Stop it. So can you talk a little bit to that, accepting your struggle and accepting who you are despite, looking around and seeing someone with MS struggling worse? Or like we can always
Hmm.
say, oh, I don't have it that bad. Look at. So can you talk about that battle or that journey that you've had of that finally, or maybe still working on that accepting process?
Yeah. Well, was that so many people came together and there was this power that was built through shared experiences. And I thought to myself, wow, I have 2 decades of experience with a very unique multiple sclerosis journey. And I kind of thought to myself, that's selfish of me in a certain sense. I could be helping others and I could be helping the child inside me who didn't have anyone else who I could relate to. It's very difficult to sit in a space like this and not know anyone else who's dealt with the same thing. Especially as a kid, I I didn't have any dreams. I didn't have any hopes because there was no one I could see who had gone through this road before me. So I didn't know if I was going to be in a wheelchair by the time I was 16. There was just this huge unknown for the rest of my life. And I finally said, if these women can be brave, I can be brave too. And it's time to stop hiding and trying to, living behind all these lies. And that's when I came out about it on social media. And there was a lot of fear behind that because I thought like people would say like it's your stop, it's not your whole identity, or you were fine all the time before, right? But they didn't understand how much I was hiding, how much I was lying, what it was like when I went home, when I wasn't like party Nicole. And it was incredible what happened when I came out about it. The people who related to me and who said they know what it's like, for me to have someone say that they have had these symptoms and that they've experienced what it's like to go through, they've experienced being in the hospital, it brought me to tears. And I had never been around, I remember going to my first MS event. I had never been around people with MS. And when I was at this event, I was bawling. Like I felt like there were people around me who really understood what I have been going through. And after living so many years with not having anyone who understood me, it was life changing. And that was the point where I really wanted to fully share my story and the difficulties that I'd gone through to help other people.
Thank you for that, adding that. And I think it's like a sad thing to say that it felt selfish, but I think like that, we feel that pressure, like, oh, it's so selfish of me. But I'm glad that pushed you to open for your own self. Like, not to be sassy, but like, that's my vibe. Screw the other people for a second. It's really amazing for your own healing journey to be like, you know what? I don't have to freaking hide. People have health
Right.
issues. Like, okay. But it was like I think it was a beautiful blessing in disguise to be able for you to feel that
Hmm.
pressure to share
Right.
while other people saw you, you finally saw yourself. I want to talk to the parents listening right now. If you love your partner but feel like after kids, everything got harder, it's not your fault. It's actually pretty normal. I wrote a book from I do to we do because couples don't get warned about the resentment, the invisible workload, the fights that escalate way too fast, and the disconnect that sneaks in. The book is part real life, part therapist brain with tools to fight better, reconnect deeper, and actually feel like a team again. Because parenting should feel like us versus the chaos, not me versus you. From I Do to We Do is available now. Order at ellyweinsteinlcsw.com.
Yeah,
Was
but
that
it
was
was
that
such
how
a,
was that process?
it was good, but at the same time, there is a lot of fear with sharing this, right? If you
Yeah.
tell the place you work at, they can't really fire you or stuff for that directly now, but they might think you're not showing up, you're not doing as good of a job, you're going to take more sick days. When I was diagnosed when I was 10 in 19 what year? 1998. My mom was told, you can't tell anybody because she won't get a job, right? There was no Obamacare, there was no protection for pre existing conditions. And that caused a lot of shame. And I thought, oh, I can't tell anybody. And being, you know, um, an independent and doing things like modeling, my fear was that if I tell people, they're not going to want to work with me. They're going to see me as a liability. So that came to the point too where I had seen Selma Blair come out with it. And that kind of made me feel like, okay, if she's not scared about her business, losing business and everything, then I don't have to be scared of it either. And that was the point where I was like, if anyone's not going to hire me or not going to want to work with me because of this, screw them. And that's not where we're at in society now. And there's a lot of people who are fighting against this. And I want to be a part of that fight.
I love that. I think it's so needed. Like you, I think also like Applegate, I think her name is
Christina
um,
Applegate.
right. Also, right. That's why in the last season of that show, she was sitting a lot more, but she was still able to show up and do her job. And the producers and the directors were able to change the style of how they would shoot the show for her to be able to be there because of how amazing she is. And it was about
Hmm.
her, not about the illness. It was about her talent,
Right.
despite. And I don't know if you are a fan of Shrinking.
Love it.
Michael J. Fox. Oh, who doesn't? I mean, as a therapist, I love it, and as a human, I love it, and I cry every episode and laugh at the same time. But like Michael J. Fox is now going to be on the third season, and they're making fun of Parkinson's, but talking about Parkinson's openly, and it's his like first role in years because it's about Parkinson's, so he doesn't have to be
Hmm.
embarrassed to be shaking and moving the way he does. He can embrace
Right.
himself and be like, "Who cares?" And it really is a beautiful thing to see the narrative changing. I recently interviewed someone on the show, Nicole Sachs, who wrote the book Mind Your Body. Have you ever heard about her?
No, I have not.
Okay, so she was trained under a doctor named Dr. Sarno. And it's this
Hmm.
idea of how our minds impact our bodies. And I was a little hesitant at first. I'm like, come on, this can't be some juju, mumbo jumbo. Just think happy thoughts and your illnesses go away. So I pushed back a lot in the interview. And she had a chronic and degenerative spinal disease. And she said to me, she goes, I love doctors. I love medicine. I also love this as a part of my
Hmm.
treatment, of my healing. And I was blown away. I bought the book, haven't read it yet because I have ADHD and there's like 18 books on my nightstand. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. I need variety. But
It's
the
okay.
idea,
My nightstand looks the same. My
good.
nightstand's the same way, so no
We're
judgment
twins.
here.
We're twins. We're twins. We got this,
Pretty
Nicole.
much.
But it's so amazing how I know for me with my Crohn's, moving to Vegas, being out of the New York lifestyle of hustle bustle, slowing down, being in nature has truly, I'm not even exaggerating, changed my stomach, has changed the way I live my life,
Yeah.
changed the way I feel every day. And I wanted to ask this question because this line for me really brings a lot of emotions up for me of when I years ago I never remembered what it was like to be healthy. I only remembered sickness. But now I forgot what it's like to be sick. Do
Mm.
you remember when that changed or moments like that and how hard that could be to go, wait, what is this? I'm not used to this healthiness. Something's going to hit the fan. And we'll get to
Hmm.
Nicole Sachs in a second. I set it up for a reason. I promise everyone listening.
Okay. Well, that is a difficult thing for me because I don't remember what it was like to be healthy. I
Yeah,
mean, do you
since
remember
you
what it
were,
was like before you were 10? This has been my
nope.
whole life. But I can tell you there is a shift from living in that space where you're in constant fear of what's going to happen, the unpredictability of your body and what's going to happen next. Am I going to wake up and not be able to feel half my face? And there definitely was a shift, I think before college, where I realized how much of an effect that fear and that constant negative talk had on my body. And living in a more positive space and a space of more hope made my body feel better. It gave me energy. It wasn't so all consuming. And we have this topic that has gotten a lot of attention of a regulated nervous system. And especially for people who have like inflammation and things like that, being able to regulate your nervous system is very powerful. It keeps you in a place where you're not just kind of like hyper vigilant, freaking out about things. And that has helped me feel like I'm living a more healthy life, like my brain isn't being toxic. And I do think that those kinds of things positively affect my MS. Right? I think that a lot of stress on your body and those negative thoughts can add to stress, and stress isn't good for anyone with a chronic illness. There's studies that it leads to, more symptoms and more issues in your body. And I think that is something we should really focus on and think about.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think it's there's so much research in that, and that is what Nicole Sachs' work is. It's the idea that she was told, "You're never going to walk again. You're never going to have kids. You're going to have to live in a wheelchair." All these doom and gloom, and and it doesn't mean that that stuff isn't a reality physically, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying that if you just manifest and think happy thoughts like Peter Pan, you're going to fly. No, you got to take care of your body physically with the doctors you trust, with the medicine that they suggest that you believe in and trust and that it's good for you. And don't forget about the physiological part of how your brain sends
Mm-hmm.
signals to your nervous system and can inflammate. Instead of word, who knows? We'll go with it. And inflame your system and then put you in a state of sickness. And for me, I know when I'm nervous or there's a lot going on, a lot of stress, I feel more fatigued. My stomach acts up. All those things go into this state of hyper intensity. They're
Yeah.
connected. So it's just about finding that balance. How do you find that balance? What are some of the things that you do that helps kind of ground you and give you that balance of life in a world that is so overwhelming and overstimulating and all over
Mm-hmm.
the place?
I really like reading. I can, get my ADHD to quiet enough. Usually it takes like 15 minutes to really get into a book and to, become absorbed enough to read it and not have your thoughts all over the place. But I really like creative books because there's a lot of resistance with creativity, and so much of that is about combating resistance and fear. And I think that that's really important when you live with a chronic illness, because you have to put yourself in a situation where you're confident that whatever is thrown your way, you will manage it. You will get through it. You will figure out a way to adapt, because look, we do, right? Like, I'm sure, like, when you got Crohn's or when you got diagnosed with Crohn's, it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life? How am I going to adjust to this? And you do get through it. And that's really important, to have that belief and confidence. So really working with my mind and tuning into the negative thoughts that are going through it, right? It's like, even with work wise, you can't do this, you're not as good enough, like other people are able to. Those kind of things affect how you move through the world a lot. And so I work on my brain in that way, but I also do things that allow me to feel safe. So it's funny that you mentioned the stuffed animals as a kid, because I was going to say, like, look, no shame here. I still have my stuffed animal, the one I went to the hospital with, because honestly, when I feel, just sometimes sleeping with it at night makes me feel less scared, right? And
I love it.
sometimes that stuff just takes over. But really recently, I mean, I journaled for years. Like, I probably have 85 journals. But at some point, I was like, exactly, at some point, I was like, I'm over this. I'm over journaling. And so now I do art therapy, which is, I saw this woman online and I was like, oh, that I want to do that. She just takes a pencil or pen, and she will shut her eyes or turn it away for her, and she does a doodle, and it's a lot of like circular movements and stuff. And then she takes it and she colors with different colors, different acrylic markers. And when I do that, my brain feels safe and it feels focused. And that, for me, even if I can get that relief for 20 minutes or 30 minutes a day, is really helpful, because it's hard to get out of fight or flight. And I think a lot of people with illnesses live in fight or flight.
Yeah, for me, it's certain music. So certain
Mm.
songs or certain moments in a song, and this also is an ADHD thing of like hyperfixation on certain things. And for me, it's music. Certain songs shut my brain off in a way that I can then be present. So when I was writing
Yeah.
my book, it was like John Bellion, any music by John Bellion or AJR. They do certain wacky things enough that it clicks on parts of my brain that shuts off other parts, so I can really just be here and not think too much and not be in my head.
Yeah, it's funny because I forgot about music for a bit. My husband doesn't like a lot of noise, especially if I'm like blasting music in the house. He's like, this is trash. But what I've really tried to do is in the morning, because sometimes I do wake up doom and gloom. Like, I'm like, oh, this day's gonna suck. I have to feel like I drag myself to do things. I will put headphones on and just blast music in my ears really loud, because that beat and stuff automatically gets me moving. And I love music. I'm Portuguese, and I come from a family where we always have music playing and stuff. And that's really great. I also have, I mean, you might too, ADHD. I have a hard time sitting down and doing my work. Like, I avoid sitting at the desk and just like getting started. And if I put music on, I'll just get like engulfed, and I'll just get like fixated. And music is a great tool to have a lot of these other thoughts and noise just stop and be pushed away.
Yeah. So we're gonna jump to a few other things. We have another thing in common. We both were featured in Playboy. You know that?
No, I wasn't aware. I didn't even realize that I was featured.
I don't know. I was scrolling through your Instagram and you like have pictures with like Playboy bikini on
Yeah, we did. I did something with a
in a sink or
photographer
something.
where he had received Playboy items, and we
Oh,
were doing a shoot in those items. Um, but it wasn't actually in a Playboy.
Well, I
But
wasn't actually.
I would say yes.
Yeah, I was not in a centerfold of Playboy either. My dad still asks me if I have any proof of the pictures of my Playboy photo shoot, but I was featured in Playboy for like an article, a therapist. I don't know how they found
That's
me.
amazing.
Yeah, it was a little weird, but like it was fun. But so, you have all these different things that you do, right? All these different
Hmm.
avenues. Are there times where you get an opportunity and you think you're not worthy of it because of your chronic illness journey, does that get in your head at all? Or are you able to be like, no, I deserve this. I earn this no matter what my past is, all the struggles I've gone through. This is me. Here I am.
So I had a very mentality as a kid, like, I'll show you, right? I was
Like
like, I can
I'll
do
prove you.
things just, I'll prove you wrong. So I was actually on a billboard in Times Square for Jollibee Chicken, and it was great. It kind of looked like uh,
I was not expecting.
Charlize.
I was not expecting you to say that company out of all things. Like, yeah, I was on a
I
billboard for
know.
fried chicken.
Well, here's what happened. They wanted it to be like a perfume ad, like Charlize Theron, like really beautiful and everything. And so I pretended to smell a perfume bottle and it all be like luxury and seductive. And then the billboard underneath was Jollibee Chicken. It was in, what is that ad, like add something. It was highlighted as like a really good marketing tool. It was in the magazine. And what happened is there's a bucket of chicken underneath me in the billboard. And you see me with a perfume, and then all of a sudden I like smell something and I sniff and I look down and I see that there's fried chicken in a bucket. And my hand crosses into the billboard underneath, and I pull out the chicken and bring it up to my billboard, and then I like take a bite of the chicken. It was brilliant. So
That's very
fun.
cool.
Yeah, I had the gold dress and everything, but when I got that opportunity, it was I'll show you, and it was a feeling like, look, I have MS, I have a chronic illness, I can do these things. I am just as capable, not always physically, but I'm just as capable as other people, and I am just as deserving. I think it's very powerful to see people in media doing big things, being recognized, being in the limelight with these diseases that we have. There's this big people were feeling the need to see disabled people, right, in television and things, because I believe it's 1 in 3 people live with a disability. Like, that's huge. Why wouldn't we be in more television? And I think it's important to have people with invisible illnesses be in television and media too. And for those people who might have more influence and a bigger presence, like to reach people, like I said with Selma Blair, she is in the limelight and she shared that, and that had a really big impact on me. And if she hadn't, I never would have saw that. And that is the struggle I had when I was 10 years old. There was no one I knew of who was doing big things, who got diagnosed as a child and is living a good life, right? Because so much of what you see about MS was people who were, not in the best situations. So that kind of made us assume MS leads to this. It's not, if
Hmm.
you're destined for like not something great. When in reality, there's a lot of people with MS who are doing well. And those images, I think, should be shown equally.
Yeah. I have three more questions. Promise. I just love you. You're amazing. You're wonderful. You're so easy to talk to. You're just
Thank you.
amazing. You have
You are too. We're just
oh
fun. We just can, like,
yeah, we just got
you
this.
have personality, I have personality. It's great.
The world's not ready for us. That's what it is. The world's not ready for us. You have this post about with a quote on the bottom of something that breaks you, puts you together stronger, kind of thing. I
Hmm.
don't remember the exact quote, but I know I just was looking through your stuff, doing some research. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger by Nietzsche, really Kelly Clarkson. No one really cares that Nietzsche said it, but
Right.
um, do you really believe that as someone who has been broken many times or has gone through being beaten and put down with chronic illness that you are stronger afterwards, or do you just know how to take the punches better?
I think both. I think
Okay.
both. I'm dealing with another health complication and stuff, and like my brother's an amazing support. He's actually running the London Marathon for the MS Society UK.
Wow.
And that has a lot to do with being the older brother to me. And so I just had to call him and just be like, "David, I just need to like be upset and tear for a bit because, I'm having to go through a whole nother experience with dealing with chronic illness." And he texted me after and he said, "You are like the strongest person I know." Sorry, I'm such like a sucker for my brother. And, you know, we don't always like to be told that we're strong, but if you do think of that, we are up against a lot more challenges. And for people who don't deal with this kind of adversity, they don't even realize how hard life can be. And my brother knows because he's seen it firsthand. But I do think it builds a lot of strength. And I do think it builds a lot, you become really resilient. And one thing I do like to say is adversity breeds character. You know, when you have these struggles, there is a lot of depth that comes with it, right? We understand, and I think a lot of it actually has to do with dealing with the concept of mortality. Sometimes you see people get older and they, as they get older and they're kind of near towards the end of life, they have this appreciation and this, they value life in a different way. Where when we get diagnosed with these things and we think about kind of, oh, like, could this end me or something? I think we have that appreciation earlier, and it changes how we look at things, and it can make us more grateful. And even, especially relationship wise, you really start to value certain people. And I definitely think it makes you stronger, and I definitely think it makes you resilient because you're like, oh, this didn't break me in the past. I'll figure out how to way to navigate this.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, you're not allowed to get emotional because if you start getting emotional, I'm going to get emotional, and then we're not even going to talk. We're just going to be bubbling. It's okay. I love it. I
Oh
love it.
yeah.
I love the mushy side. And I remember when my wife would have like a stomach bug, and she would be in the bathroom, and she would come out and she'd be like, "Oh my gosh, is this what you go through every day?" And I'd be like, "Yep." And she'd be like, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible." And I'm like, "Yep." She's like, "I never realized that." And I'm like, "Yep." And it's just like this, being able to actually empathize with you is very hard because empathy comes with, I know, and I put myself in your shoes. But
Mm,
you can't, right? You can't put yourself in your shoes until you are struggling or suffering or in that state of pain. And I don't wish that upon anyone. But when they do and they're like, "Oh, I can get a hint of it."
yeah.
Wow, I can understand it. Um, you post a lot, you do a lot of things out there. How do you handle the hate that comes with, having as many followers as you do, being in the public eye, doing all the things, speaking, and then posting two different sides of you, of this model-esque, beautiful
Mm-hmm.
campaign, but then also you have the pictures of you in the hospital. Do people like ever hate on you of like, "Oh, you're just doing this for attention," or blah, 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 whatever stupid people? That's the voice I hear when people troll online. How do you handle that?
It's actually really interesting because maybe I'm blind to it, but I rarely get hate.
Okay, good.
And it maybe it's the way I share the content, but most people just feel seen and like they're given recognition. They're not hating on me because I think they understand the dichotomy of the
Of
situation.
life,
And
yeah.
so yeah, and I think maybe once I had someone like a few times maybe, but mostly my followers respond to it. And they're like, "You don't understand what it's like to live with this." Actually, I think I posted once, it got 28 million views, and it was a video about when you shower. It's a round of applause audio, right? So it's like, "Oh yeah, round of applause, bravo." And I'm getting out of the shower and it's like when you finally shower after 4 days. And
Yeah.
that led to a lot of controversy because people were talking about how they were depressed and then other people were commenting like that's inexcusable, like that's disgusting. And then people were fighting back about it. I think that's the most conflict I ever saw on a post, but granted it got 28 million views. So you're going to imagine that there's some people arguing about it, but that's a perfect example of people not understanding what it's like to live with something like that. You know, I can understand how someone who's so depressed doesn't shower for 4 days.
Yeah. I have with my ADHD sometimes I just it's not top of mind. And my wife will be like, so you're disgusting. And I'm like, yeah, but you're stuck with me, so like deal with it. Or like if I don't shave, it's like either I
Yep.
shower this week or I shave this week. Ariella is my wife. And they're like, pick one. You want me to smell or do you want me to be clean shaven? Get on board. Pick one. I can't do both sometimes. Like I don't have the energy. Stop it. But it is something very true. Last question,
Mm.
and this is more
Okay.
personal uh, from my clinical perspective as a therapist who works with relationships. When I was dating my wife, my mother-in-law asked my wife, and I really appreciate my mother-in-law for saying this. Don't tell her. Don't tell her I said that I appreciate her. She knows, she knows, she knows. I've been married for 10 years with my wife for 11. She knows how much I appreciate my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law knows. But she said to my wife, are you sure you're ready to be with someone who has Crohn's, with ADHD, with anxiety? Are you sure you're ready to handle that bag of tricks? You should talk to Ellie about what it actually means to understand so you can fully know what you're signing up for, even though you actually don't because you haven't lived with him to
Mm-hmm.
know what it is. And I'll be honest, we've canceled massive trips. We were supposed to go. My wife loves big, iconic things like the Eiffel Tower. We went to France, thank God we saw it. But like, we were going to see Niagara Falls when we lived in New York. We had to cancel a trip. It crushed my wife. We were supposed to go to New Orleans. My daughter had the flu, so it wasn't me, thank God. But like, sickness has gotten in the way of a lot of good, positive, canceling plans,
Mm-hmm.
bumps in the road, things not as expected. My wife was even worried about us having our first kid, not because of fertility, which we had to do IVF, but because Ellie, are you going to be able to get up in the middle of the night? Because sleep is so important to my stomach. Am I going to be alone in this struggle? How
Mm-hmm.
have been the conversations for anyone who's in a relationship, about to be in a relationship? How do you broach the topic with your loved one? How do you talk to your partner about the ins and outs? How do you show them and give them an insight without scaring them off, but giving them some reality so they know what they're signing up for? Can you kind of give a little insight from a relational perspective?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things you're talking about where I'm like, ooh, I can say this, say that. But first I'll say there were three instances relationship wise. When I was in college, I kind of was like, I kind of went through guys and just was, my dad said that I treated them like tissues. Like they'd be really into me and then I'd be like, oh, I'm over this. So I dated one guy and I ended up ending things with him. And I remember once again, my dad is trying to say things for like, he means well, they just don't come out well. He was trying to be like, oh, like you broke up with this guy again. He's like, you should be kind of, grateful when you're in these relationships. Because he said to me, he goes, I wouldn't want to date a sick girl.
Hmm.
And, that wasn't very helpful, but that was one of my experiences. And I just kind of was like, first off, I never told any boyfriends. So that was kind of the way I thought about it before. But at that age, I was like, whatever. But then when I was in LA, I started dating an actor and he's a pretty big actor and I was super close with his family and I was really concerned. He knew about it. He was kind of like, I don't care. We'll figure it out. We were young. So he's just, he was so in love with me. He just was whatever. Um, but I was nervous to tell his parents because of that. What you were talking about with his parents, they know what you're signing up for? Right?
Mhm.
Like, are you really aware of it? And his parents were amazing. And that gave me a lot of, They gave me a positive outlook about it's about finding the right people, right? So I believed that there were people and there who would understand and be okay with it. I think there are people, your health can change like in a second. So just because someone else has a healthcare situation already when you're entering a relationship doesn't mean that the other person can't experience it. And that other person wants you to be there when if they do experience something. So how can you not want to be there for somebody else?
Yeah.
Personality and connection and a good relationship is so hard to find that kind of trumps everything else.
Yeah.
And so that ended. Mind you, all my relationships I was in, I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want guys to, be like, ooh, I don't want to be with a sick girl, or this is going to be too much. I kind of felt like I'd figure it out when I get there. But when I moved to LA and after that relationship with the actor, I was like, I'm not wasting my time. After I started telling people about the MS, it's like, I'm not wasting my time. If I tell someone and they know right away and they peace out, like, I don't want them in my life anyways, then there's just not that understanding. It's very important to have that support in a relationship. So my husband, when we met, he had briefly dated a girl with MS, and apparently like after a few dates he told his mom, he's like, I met the girl I'm going to marry. And he didn't care because what he cared, he's older too, so he was at that stage in his life where he was like, forget it, it's all about like finding the right person.
Mhm.
Regardless of my MS, I was the right person for him. And he realized how the disease was. And my husband naturally is someone who likes to take care of people. I mean, he makes me coffee every morning and he says he likes to make me coffee. I'm not that type of person,
Can he
right?
come to my house?
I know all I do is send him the package, like the parcel pending number, and he gets all my packages. He's like, oh, I'm going to the gym. Want me to do the returns to Amazon for you? I didn't live that kind of life, but that's how he is. And he shows up for me a lot in that way. And he's understanding and super supportive in the way he reacts when I'm having a hard day. He's super compassionate. He also has a great relationship with his mom. That's always like a key factor. How you are with your family. So I encourage people. Well, the first thing I say is, look, everyone's different. If you want to tell them later on, that is fine. It's your journey. If you don't feel comfortable like the first date, that's totally fine. You're going to tell them eventually, and it's your timeline, and that is totally acceptable. If you want to tell them immediately, because you're just like, let's cut to the chase, I don't have a lot of time, I'm trying to efficiently date, that's okay too. But I think that people really need to figure out what's right for them.
I love that. Okay. We had a great conversation talking about A, B, C, all the wonderful things about chronic illness, the darkness, the isolation, the ups, the downs, how to navigate relationships. If you can talk to someone right in the camera and tell them one thing or two things, if you're open to it, of the idea of what they could hear today to take into their life, if they would be going to therapy, wouldn't be talking to a professional about it, that they can take into their world and feel that warmth, feel that production, feel that growth, what would it be?
It would be that you're not alone and all your experiences are valid. So no one can take that from you. And it's okay, the emotions that you are going through that are related to your journey with chronic illness.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being on the show. If you guys want to hear more, tune in every week to The Dude Therapist. And don't forget to follow, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to rate, review the episode and the show. And don't forget to check out Nicole. She's a badass and she's amazing and wonderful in so many ways. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of The Dude Therapist.
Thanks for having me.
Follow now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and finally, see me on YouTube.